Some wars end when people finally return home. Others never truly end. History remembers thousands of heroes. Some built empires. Some conquered great cities. Others carved their names into history through bloodshed. But there was one man whose greatest battle was never fought for a kingdom, nor for glory. He simply wanted to go home. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But sometimes, the hardest journey a person can make isn't leaving. It's finding the way back. And that is exactly what the story of Odysseus is about. 20 years. Nearly a third of a man's life. For 20 long years. One man fought to stay alive for one reason alone. To see his wife again. To embrace his son once more. But what stood in his way wasn't hunger or storms. It was giants who fed on human flesh. Sea monsters capable of swallowing entire ships. Enchantresses who could bend the human mind to their will. Gateways to the land of the dead. And above all, a God who would never forgive him. What's even more astonishing is that all of this happened after the war had already ended. Because there's one thing most people never realize. Odysseus's greatest battle didn't begin at Troy. And it didn't end there either. His real journey began on the long road home. Perhaps that's why, nearly 3,000 years later, we're still telling his story. Films are made about him. Novels continue to be written. Video games keep bringing his legend to life. Because Odysseus wasn't remembered simply for being a great warrior. What made him different wasn't the sharpness of his sword. It was the sharpness of his mind. But sometimes, a brilliant mind comes with the heaviest price of all. Now, let's travel back nearly 3,000 years. To an age when legends had not yet become legends. When people believed that God still walked among them. To the place where it all began. Ithaca. The story begins on a small island in the Ionian Sea. A place most people today would never notice. Rocky. Quiet. Far from the richest kingdom in Greece. Its name was Ithaca. It wasn't famous for its size. It wasn't feared because of a powerful army. And it certainly wasn't the wealthiest kingdom of its time. Yet history would remember it for one reason. It was home to Odysseus. At first glance, there was nothing extraordinary about him. He wasn't the tallest king. He wasn't the strongest warrior. And he wasn't the kind of man who rushed into battle just to prove his courage. In fact, if you had met him before the Trojan War, you probably wouldn't have guessed that his name would survive for thousands of years. Because Odysseus possessed something far more dangerous than physical strength. He knew how people thought. He watched before he acted. He listened more than he spoke. While others relied on force, Odysseus relied on patience. He understood something that many rulers never did. The smartest move isn't always the fastest one. Sometimes, the greatest victory comes from waiting. His kingdom was peaceful. His people respected him. His wife, Penelope, was known throughout Greece for her wisdom and loyalty. Together, they had a young son named Telemachus. For Odysseus, life was exactly as he had hoped it would be. A loyal family. A stable kingdom. A future that finally felt certain. If someone had told him that he wouldn't see his home again for 20 years, he probably would have laughed. Because nothing suggested that his world was about to change. But far from the shores of Ithaca, a single decision was about to pull every major kingdom in Greece into a conflict that would become legend. And Odysseus, whether he wanted it or not, was about to become part of it. No one wakes up expecting to become part of history. Most people simply live their lives. Until one decision changes everything. For Odysseus, that moment began hundreds of miles away. In the kingdom of Sparta, there lived a queen whose beauty had become legendary. Her name was Helen. For generations, poets would call her the face that launched 1,000 ships. But beauty has always had a price. One day, Helen disappeared. According to some stories, she was abducted by Paris, the Prince of Troy. Others claimed she left willingly. Even today, no one knows for certain which version is true. But in the end, it didn't matter. Because the Greeks didn't care why she was gone. They only cared that she was. Years earlier, Helen's many suitors had made an unusual promise. No matter who she chose as her husband, the others would defend that marriage if it was ever threatened. At the time, it seemed like nothing more than a clever agreement. Now, it became a declaration of war. Messengers rode across Greece. Kings received the same call. Gather your men. Prepare your ships. The time has come. One by one, the kingdoms answered. Some came for honor. Others came for loyalty. Some simply feared the consequences of refusing. Soon, the greatest military alliance the Greek world had ever seen began to take shape. Thousands of warriors. Hundreds of ships. Dozens of kings. All sailing toward one destination. The city of Troy. But among all those rulers, there was one man who wanted nothing to do with this war. Odysseus. Unlike many of the others, he had everything he needed. A peaceful kingdom. A loving wife. A newborn son. There was nothing waiting for him in Troy. Only the risk of losing everything he already had. And somehow, deep down, he seemed to know it. If there was one man who didn't want this war, it was Odysseus. Unlike the other kings, he wasn't chasing glory. He had no interest in becoming a legend. Everything he truly cared about was already waiting for him in Ithaca. His wife. His newborn son. His people. Why would he risk all of that for someone else's war? Ancient writers tell us that Odysseus believed something terrible would happen if he sailed to Troy. Whether it was instinct or prophecy, we'll never know. But one thing is certain. He wanted no part of it. So he came up with a plan. One so strange that it has survived for nearly 3,000 years. When the Greek messengers arrived to recruit him, they found a king who appeared to have lost his mind. Odysseus had harnessed an ox and a donkey to the same plow. Something no experienced farmer would ever do. Then, instead of planting seeds, he scattered salt across his fields. It was absurd. Exactly as he intended. Who would send a madman to war? For a brief moment, it almost worked. But among the men sent to bring him to Troy, there was one who wasn't convinced. He decided to test the king. Without saying a word, he picked up Odysseus's infant son, Telemachus, and placed him directly in front of the moving plow. Everything depended on what happened next. Odysseus could keep pretending. He could continue driving forward and sacrifice the one person he loved most. Or he could reveal the truth. In a single heartbeat, he turned the plow aside, saving his son and destroying his own deception. The act lasted only a second, but it changed the course of his life forever. The messengers had their answer. Odysseus wasn't insane. He had simply been trying to escape a future he was already beginning to fear. There would be no more excuses. No more hiding. The ships were waiting. And so was destiny. When the Greek fleet finally reached Troy, many believed the war would be over within days. They couldn't have been more wrong. From the sea, Troy looked almost untouchable. Its massive walls rose high above the battlefield. Built to withstand invasions. Built to outlast kings. Built to survive. The Greeks had the greatest warriors of their age. But every attack ended the same way. Broken shields. Fallen soldiers. And another sunset without victory. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Then months became years. The war settled into a brutal routine. Fight. Retreat. Bury the dead. And do it all again the next morning. Back in Greece. Life continued. Children grew older. Families changed. Seasons came and went. But outside the walls of Troy, time seemed frozen. The battlefield became home. Young soldiers became veterans. Veterans became names carved into graves. Some never lived long enough to know why they were fighting anymore. They simply fought. Because that was all they had left. Among those warriors stood Odysseus. He fought beside some of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology. Achilles. Ajax. Diomedes. Men whose strength became legendary. But Odysseus earned something different. Respect. Not because he was the strongest. Because he saw the battlefield differently. While others searched for the next attack, he searched for the next mistake. He watched. He listened. He waited. And slowly, he began to understand something. The walls of Troy weren't the real problem. The real problem was the way everyone kept trying to break them. 10 years passed. 10 years of blood. 10 years of funerals. 10 years without victory. The greatest army in Greece had reached a point where even hope was beginning to disappear. And that was exactly when Odysseus had his most dangerous idea. After 10 years, the Greeks had almost nothing left. Not because they had run out of soldiers. They had run out of hope. Every plan had failed. Every assault had ended the same way. The walls of Troy still stood. Untouched. Almost mocking the army gathered outside. Most commanders believed the answer was simple. More men. More weapons. A bigger attack. Odysseus believed the opposite. If 10 years of force hadn't worked, why would an 11th year be any different? He stopped thinking like a soldier. And started thinking like a Trojan. What would make an entire city lower its guard? Not fear. Victory. The Trojans had spent 10 years expecting another attack. They would never expect surrender. That single thought changed history. The idea sounded ridiculous. Instead of breaking into Troy, they would convince Troy to invite them inside. A giant wooden horse would be built, large enough to hide a carefully chosen group of Greek warriors. The rest of the army would appear to leave. The camps would be abandoned. The fires extinguished. The ships would disappear beyond the horizon. To anyone watching from the walls, it would look like the war was finally over. Some Greek leaders thought Odysseus had lost his mind. Others believed it was their last chance. In the end, they had nothing left to lose. So they began to build. Day after day, the wooden horse slowly took shape. Massive. Beautifully crafted. Not just a weapon, but a masterpiece of deception. Inside, a small group of warriors waited in complete darkness. No room to move. Barely enough room to breathe. Every sound mattered. Every heartbeat felt too loud. Outside, the rest of the Greek fleet sailed away. Or at least, That's exactly what they wanted the Trojans to believe. When the sun rose the next morning, the beaches that had been filled with soldiers for 10 years were empty. The war seemed to be over. The Trojans opened their gates. For the first time in a decade, they walked freely across the battlefield. Some laughed. Some cried. Some dropped to their knees, certain that the nightmare had finally ended. Then they saw it, standing alone on the empty shore. The wooden horse. No one knew that the fate of Troy was already sealed. For a moment, the people of Troy believed it was over. 10 years of war. 10 years of fear. 10 years of watching friends and family die. And now, the enemy was gone. The beaches were empty. The Greek ships had vanished beyond the horizon. For the first time in a decade, the city celebrated. Children ran through the streets. Music echoed between the walls. Wine flowed. The nightmare was finally over. Or so they thought. Not everyone trusted the wooden horse. One man, a priest named Laocoon, warned the people. Do not trust the Greeks, even when they bring gifts. According to the ancient stories, the moment he spoke those words, something terrifying happened. 2 enormous sea serpents emerged from the water. They wrapped themselves around Laocoon and his 2 sons. And before the horrified crowd could do anything, they crushed them to death. To the people of Troy, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a sign from the gods. A warning. Not to destroy the horse. Today, historians still debate what really happened. But one thing is certain. That moment changed the fate of an entire civilization. The gates were opened. The giant horse was pulled into the city. The people cheered. They sang. They celebrated the end of the war. Without realizing, they had carried their own destruction through the gates. Night slowly covered Troy. One by one, the celebrations faded. The streets grew quiet. The city fell asleep. Inside the wooden horse, the Greek soldiers waited in complete silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Every minute felt like an hour. Then, in the darkness, Odysseus gave the signal. The hidden door opened. One by one, the warriors climbed down. They moved through the silent streets. Like shadows. Their first destination. The city gates. Within minutes, the gates of Troy were unlocked from the inside. Waiting just beyond the coast. The Greek fleet had never truly left. Under the cover of darkness, the ships returned. Thousands of soldiers poured into the city. What followed was chaos. Fires spread through the streets. Homes were destroyed. The defenders, caught completely by surprise, had almost no chance to organize. By sunrise, the great city of Troy had fallen. A war that lasted 10 years ended in a single night. And at the center of it all was one man. Not the strongest warrior. Not the fastest. But the one whose mind had accomplished what 10 years of fighting could not. Odysseus had won the war. At least, that's what he believed. The war was over. Troy was gone. The Greek kings began preparing for the journey home. After 10 long years, it was finally time. Odysseus stood on the shore, looking toward the sea. Somewhere beyond that endless horizon, his wife was waiting. His son had grown from a baby into a young boy. His home was finally within reach. Or so he believed. Because sometimes, Winning a war is the easy part. Getting home can be much harder. As the fleet sailed away from Troy, the winds were calm. The sea was quiet. Everything seemed perfect. Until one mistake changed everything. On one of the islands they reached, Odysseus and his men encountered a tribe unlike anything they had ever seen. The Ciconies. The Greeks attacked. At first, victory came easily. The city was captured. Supplies were taken. Wine, food, treasure. Odysseus ordered his men to leave immediately. He knew they had already pushed their luck. But after 10 years of war, the soldiers wanted to celebrate. They ignored him. They drank. They feasted. They believed the danger had passed. It hadn't. By sunrise, the Ciconies had returned with reinforcements. What should have been a quick victory turned into a massacre. Many of Odysseus' men never made it back to their ships. It was the first warning. The journey home would not be easy. Storms soon scattered the fleet across the sea. Days passed. Then weeks. No one knew where they were anymore. The familiar coastline of Greece had disappeared. Then, another island appeared on the horizon. Peaceful. Silent. Almost inviting. The exhausted sailors believed. Perhaps their luck had finally changed. They had no idea. They were about to step into the first true nightmare of Odysseus' journey. Because this island was home to the Lotus Eaters. The island looked harmless. No towering walls. No armies. No monsters waiting on the shore. Just green fields. And a strange sense of peace. After everything they had endured, the place felt almost unreal. Odysseus ordered a small group of men to go ashore and learn who lived there. The sailors agreed and disappeared inland. Hours passed. Then more hours. But they never returned. Concerned, Odysseus sent others to search for them. What they found was unexpected. The missing men weren't injured. They weren't prisoners. In fact, they seemed happier than they had been in years. The island was inhabited by a people known as the Lotus Eaters. They offered the sailors a strange fruit. Sweet. Harmless. At least on the surface. But anyone who tasted it soon forgot something important. Home. Family. Purpose. The desire to leave. The sailors no longer cared about Ithaca. They no longer cared about their journey. They wanted only one thing. To stay. Forever. When Odysseus arrived and saw what had happened, he understood the danger immediately. Not every threat arrives carrying a sword. Some arrive carrying comfort. His men begged him to let them stay. Some cried. Some resisted. Others could barely remember why they had boarded the ships in the first place. Odysseus ignored every protest. He ordered his men to drag them back by force. One by one, they were carried to the ships. Still pleading to return. Still calling for the island. Still forgetting who they were. Only when the sails filled with wind once again did the island finally disappear behind them. But the lesson remained. The journey home would not only test their strength. It would test their minds. And far worse dangers were waiting ahead. Because soon, Odysseus would come face to face with the creature most people associate with his name. A monster with a single eye. A monster whose mistake would bring the wrath of a god upon him. The Cyclops. After leaving the island of the Lotus Eaters, the sea carried Odysseus and his men to another unfamiliar land. This island felt different. Wild. Untouched. There were no cities. No farms. No sign of laws or civilization. Only towering cliffs. And endless silence. As they explored the coastline, they discovered something strange. A massive cave. Inside were baskets overflowing with cheese. Clay jars filled with fresh milk. Pens crowded with sheep and goats. It looked like the home of a shepherd. Some of Odysseus' men immediately wanted to leave. "We found food. Let's take what we need and sail." But Odysseus refused. He wanted to meet the owner. It was a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. As night fell, the ground began to shake. Heavy footsteps echoed across the valley. Then he appeared. A giant unlike anything they had ever seen. A single eye stared from the center of his face. His name was Polyphemus. He wasn't just enormous. He was terrifying. Without a word, he rolled a boulder across the entrance of the cave. A stone so massive that no human could hope to move it. The Greeks were trapped. At first, Polyphemus simply watched them. Then he asked one question. "Who are you?" Odysseus answered politely. He explained that they were sailors. That the war was over. That they only asked for hospitality. The Cyclops laughed. He cared nothing for the laws of men. Or the customs of the gods. Then, without warning, he reached into the crowd. He grabbed one of Odysseus' men, smashed him against the stone, and devoured him. The others froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Before sunrise, another man was gone. Then another. Every meal meant another friend. Every sunrise meant fewer survivors. Strength wouldn't save them. There was only one way out. They would have to outsmart the monster. And no one was better at that than Odysseus. The giant believed he had already won. He had trapped the Greeks. There was no escape. Every morning, he rolled the massive stone away to let his flock graze. Every evening, he sealed the cave again. The opening was impossible to pass. Not because of the cave, but because of him. Odysseus knew they couldn't defeat the Cyclops by force. They had to make him lower his guard. Among the supplies they had brought from Troy was a strong wine, unlike anything Polyphemus had ever tasted. Odysseus offered it to the giant. At first, the Cyclops was suspicious. Then he drank and asked for more. Cup after cup. The monster's laughter grew louder. His words became slower. Before long, the giant could barely keep his eye open. Smiling, he looked at Odysseus. "If you've given me such a wonderful gift, tell me your name." Odysseus didn't hesitate. "My name is Nobody." The Cyclops laughed. Then, within moments, he collapsed into a deep sleep. Odysseus moved quickly. His men had already sharpened a massive wooden stake. Together, they pushed its burning tip into the fire. They waited until it glowed red. Then, with every ounce of strength they had left, they drove it straight into the giant's only eye. The cave exploded with screams. Polyphemus stumbled wildly through the darkness. Blind, bleeding, enraged. His cries echoed across the island. Other Cyclopes rushed toward the cave. From outside, they shouted, "Polyphemus! Who is hurting you?" The giant roared back. "Nobody. Nobody is attacking me." The other Cyclopes fell silent. If nobody was attacking him, Then there was nothing to fear. One by one, they walked away. Odysseus' plan had worked perfectly. At sunrise, Polyphemus rolled the great stone aside once more. Blind now, he stood at the entrance, feeling the backs of his sheep as they left. Certain that no man could escape without being touched. But once again, Odysseus had thought one step ahead. Each surviving sailor tied himself beneath the belly of a sheep, hidden underneath the thick wool. One by one, the animals walked out of the cave. The giant felt only their backs, never realizing his prisoners were passing beneath his hands. At last, Odysseus stepped onto the shore. He had done the impossible. He had defeated a monster no army could have killed. He should have sailed away silently. He should have disappeared forever. But victory has a way of feeding pride. As the ship drifted farther from the island, Odysseus stood at the stern. Then he shouted. It wasn't nobody. It was Odysseus, King of Ithaca. Remember my name. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the blind giant lifted his face toward the sky and smiled. Because he knew something Odysseus didn't. Polyphemus was the son of Poseidon, the god of the sea. And with a single prayer, Odysseus had just made the most powerful enemy of his life. The sea itself had become their enemy. Every wave reminded Odysseus of the promise he had made to himself. To return home, no matter the cost. But Poseidon had heard his son's prayer. The god of the sea would not forget. And he would not forgive. Storm after storm drove the fleet farther from Greece. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. No map could guide them now. No sailor knew where they truly were. Then, a new island appeared on the horizon. Unlike the others, this one felt peaceful. It was the floating kingdom of Aeolus, keeper of the winds. The ruler chosen by the gods to command every breeze that crossed the sea. To Odysseus' surprise, Aeolus welcomed him as a guest. For nearly a month, they shared meals, stories, and laughter. When it was finally time to leave, Aeolus offered Odysseus one final gift. Not gold. Not weapons. Something far more valuable. He gathered every dangerous wind into a great leather bag. Every storm. Every violent gust. Every current that could drive a ship off course. Then he sealed it tightly. Only one wind remained free. The gentle west wind. Just enough to carry the fleet safely back to Ithaca. Aeolus handed Odysseus the bag. And gave him a single warning. No matter what happens, do not open it. For 9 straight days, Odysseus never slept for long. He stood at the helm himself, protecting the bag, protecting his men, protecting the dream that had kept him alive for so many years. Then, at sunrise on the 10th day, he saw it. Ithaca. His home. The mountains. The shoreline. He was close enough to recognize it. For the first time in 20 years. Home was finally within reach. Relieved. Exhausted. Odysseus closed his eyes. Just for a moment. It was the first real sleep he had allowed himself in days. His men watched him. Then they looked at the mysterious bag. They had carried it across the sea without ever knowing what was inside. Whispers spread through the ships. What if it's treasure? What if Aeolus rewarded only Odysseus? What if he's keeping it all for himself? Curiosity became suspicion. Suspicion became greed. Finally, One sailor untied the knot. Then another helped him open it. In an instant, every imprisoned wind burst free. The sea exploded. The sky turned black. The ship spun helplessly across the waves. The coast of Ithaca disappeared into the storm, until it vanished completely. When Odysseus woke, home was gone. Not because they had taken the wrong course, but because the one thing he could never control was the hearts of the people sailing beside him. The storm finally came to an end. But the nightmare hadn't. The winds carried Odysseus back to the island of Aeolus. Once again, he stood before the ruler of the winds. This time, he had no gift to offer. Only another request. He explained everything. The storm. The bag. His men's mistake. He begged Aeolus for one more chance. But the answer was not what he expected. Aeolus looked at him in silence. Then he slowly shook his head. No. If the gods have turned against you, I will not stand in their way. For the first time, Odysseus realized something terrifying. This wasn't just bad luck anymore. The gods themselves had begun to abandon him. With nowhere else to go, the fleet returned to the open sea. Days later, another coastline appeared. It looked peaceful, just like so many islands before. But Odysseus had learned something. The most dangerous places rarely looked dangerous. As always, he sent a small group of men ashore. They never came back. Soon, another group disappeared. Then, the truth revealed itself. This island belonged to the Laestrygonians, a race of enormous giants. Unlike the Cyclops, these giants didn't hunt alone. An entire city of them rushed toward the shore. The Greeks had no time to fight. No time to escape. Massive rocks rained down from the cliffs. Ships shattered like pieces of wood. Sailors were thrown into the sea. Others were dragged away, never to be seen again. Panic spread through the fleet. Men screamed. Oars snapped. The harbor became a trap. One by one, the ships were destroyed. Not by storms. Not by monsters from the sea. But by giants raining death from above. Odysseus watched in horror. There was nothing he could do. Nothing. Except save the one ship that had never entered the harbor. His own. He cut the ropes himself. His crew rowed with everything they had. Behind them, the sea was filled with broken ships, floating shields, splintered masts. And the men who had fought beside him for years were gone. In a single afternoon, almost the entire Greek fleet disappeared. Dozens of ships, reduced to one. Hundreds of men, reduced to a handful. For the first time since leaving Troy, Odysseus understood the truth. This journey wasn't taking him home. It was slowly taking everything away from him. And still, the worst was yet to come. Only one ship remained. One ship. Where once there had been dozens. The sea felt emptier than ever. So did Odysseus. Every face around him reminded him of someone who hadn't survived. Every silence carried another memory. Days later, a new island appeared through the morning mist. Dense forests covered its hills. Smoke rose gently into the sky. For the first time in a long while, it looked like a place where people actually lived. The island was called Aeaea. Odysseus divided his remaining crew into two groups. One would stay behind with the ship. The other would explore the island. At first, Everything seemed peaceful. Until they found a beautiful stone palace hidden deep within the forest. Lions and wolves wandered around it. But something was strange. The animals didn't attack. Instead, they quietly approached the sailors. Almost as if they were welcoming them. Inside the palace, a woman greeted them with a warm smile. Her name was Circe. She invited them to eat, to drink, to rest. After everything they had suffered, it felt like kindness. It wasn't. The moment the meal was finished, Circe raised her staff, spoke a few quiet words, and in the blink of an eye, the sailors were no longer men. They had become pigs. Their minds remained human. Their bodies did not. Only one man escaped. He ran all the way back to the shore. Breathless. Terrified. He told Odysseus everything. Some begged him not to go. "You can't fight magic. You'll die too." But Odysseus had already made his decision. If his men were still alive, he wasn't leaving without them. Alone. He walked into the forest. Toward the palace. Toward the woman who had defeated his crew without drawing a single drop of blood. He had faced monsters. He had survived giants. But this was something entirely different. And before he reached the palace, someone unexpected stepped into his path. A messenger from the gods. Hermes himself. The god smiled, as if he already knew exactly what was about to happen. Hermes stopped in front of Odysseus. The messenger of the gods looked almost amused. "As brave as you are, you won't survive her magic." From beneath his cloak, Hermes pulled out a small white flower. It looked ordinary. But it was anything but. The gods called it moly. A plant so powerful that even the strongest spells could not overcome it. "Take this," Hermes said. "And whatever happens, do not fear her." With that, he disappeared. As suddenly as he had arrived. Odysseus continued toward the palace alone. Circe welcomed him with the same smile she had given the others. She offered him food, wine, a place to rest. Then she spoke the same spell. She expected another helpless victim. Nothing happened. For the first time, Circe looked surprised. Odysseus drew his sword. The witch stepped back. Not in anger, but in respect. She understood immediately. A god had intervened. Instead of fighting, she made him an offer. "Free your men. Stay as my guest. And no one else will be harmed." Odysseus accepted. One by one, his companions were restored to human form. Weak. Confused. But alive. Days passed. Then weeks. Before anyone realized it, an entire year had gone by. For the first time since leaving Troy, there were no storms. No monsters. No battles. Only peace. It would have been easy to stay forever. But every sunrise reminded Odysseus of something. A promise. A wife who still waited. A son who had grown up without his father. A kingdom that still had no king. One morning, he stood before Circe. "It's time." She didn't try to stop him. Instead, she became serious. "There is only one path that will lead you home. But no living man would choose it." Odysseus frowned. "What must I do?" Circe looked directly into his eyes. "If you want to reach Ithaca, you must first travel to the land of the dead. Silence filled the room. Even the sea outside seemed to stand still. Every monster, every storm, every giant, had been something a man could fight. But death was different. And for the first time, even Odysseus hesitated. No sailor dreams of reaching the land of the dead. Yet that was exactly where Odysseus was headed. Following Circe's instructions, his ship sailed toward the edge of the known world. Far beyond the islands shown on any map. Far beyond the places where ordinary men dared to travel. The sea grew colder. The wind became strangely still. Even the sky seemed darker than before. Eventually, they reached a lonely shore. There were no villages. No birds. No sound except the waves. This was the entrance to the underworld. Following the ancient ritual, Odysseus dug a small trench into the earth. He poured wine, milk, honey, and finally, the blood of a sacrificed ram. Circe had warned him. The dead will come. And when they do not speak to them. Not until the prophet Tiresias has arrived. For a while, nothing happened. Then, shapes began to emerge from the darkness. Hundreds of them. Silent. Restless. Souls that had long since left the world of the living. Some looked like old men. Others were young warriors who had fallen before their time. All of them were drawn toward the blood. As if they hadn't known warmth. Or life. For centuries. Odysseus stood his ground. Sword in hand. Holding them back. Waiting for only one soul. Then, an old man stepped forward. Blind in life. Yet able to see more clearly than anyone else in death. It was Tiresias. The prophet who had guided kings. Even from beyond the grave. He drank from the offering. Then lifted his head. You will return to Ithaca. But not as the man who left it. The sea god has marked you. And every choice you make from this moment on will decide who lives. And who never sees home again. The words lingered in the cold air. But Tiresias wasn't finished. He warned Odysseus about an island sacred to Helios. About cattle that must never be touched. About dangers still waiting beyond the horizon. Then, the prophet was gone. But someone else stepped forward. A woman. Odysseus stared at her. Unable to breathe. It was his mother. When he had sailed for Troy, she had still been alive. He never knew that she had died while waiting for him. He reached out to embrace her. His arms passed straight through. He tried again. And again. Each time, there was nothing to hold. Only a shadow. Only a memory. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then his mother smiled. Not because she was happy, but because after 20 long years, she could finally see her son one last time. When the ship finally left the shores of the underworld, Odysseus carried something heavier than fear. He carried knowledge. Because sometimes, knowing the future is far more frightening than facing the unknown. The sea was calm once again. Too calm. After leaving the underworld, Odysseus returned to Circe one final time. She listened carefully as he told her everything. The prophecy. The warning. His mother's final words. When he finished, Circe's expression changed. There is one danger that cannot be defeated with strength. The sirens. She told him their voices were unlike anything a human could imagine. Not beautiful because they sang, Beautiful because they knew exactly what each person longed to hear. Every sailor heard a different song. Some heard the voices of their families. Others heard promises of glory. Some believed they were listening to the gods themselves. But every path led to the same place. Death. The cliffs surrounding the Sirens' Island were covered with broken ships. And the bones of those who had sailed too close. There is only one way to survive, Circe warned. Seal your men's ears with beeswax. And if you wish to hear their song, you must be tied to the mast. No matter what happens. No matter what you say. They must never untie you. Days later, the island appeared on the horizon. No birds circled above it. No waves crashed against the rocks. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath. Odysseus melted the beeswax himself. One by one. He pressed it into the ears of every sailor. Then he walked to the center of the ship. Bind me to the mast. His men hesitated. If I beg, if I scream, if I threaten you, you must not let me go. They pulled the ropes tight. Tighter. Until he could barely move. The ship drifted closer. Then, the singing began. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The voices were soft. Almost gentle. They called his name. Not as a king. Not as a warrior. But as a man who had spent 20 years trying to go home. They promised him answers. Peace. The end of his suffering. For a moment, Odysseus forgot everything. He pulled against the ropes. He shouted. He begged his men to release him. Then he ordered them. When they refused, he cursed them. His face twisted with desperation. Every instinct told him to leap into the sea. To swim toward the voices. His crew never looked back. They kept rowing. Ignoring every word their captain screamed. Minute by minute. The voices grew weaker. Then, they disappeared. Silence returned. Only then did his men untie him. Odysseus collapsed onto the deck. Breathing heavily. Ashamed. He had defeated monsters. He had escaped giants. He had outwitted kings. But the greatest battle he had ever fought had taken place inside his own mind. Unfortunately, the sea had one final lesson waiting for him. And this time, no amount of intelligence would be enough. Ahead lay two horrors. One would devour his men. The other would swallow the sea itself. Scylla and Charybdis. The sirens were behind them. But there was no time to celebrate. Circe's final warning echoed in Odysseus' mind. There are two paths ahead. Neither leads to safety. On one side, Scylla. A creature hidden high within the cliffs. 6 long necks. 6 terrifying heads. Each one capable of snatching a man from the deck of a ship in a single heartbeat. On the other side, Charybdis. A monstrous whirlpool. 3 times each day. It swallowed the sea itself. Then spat it back into the world. Entire ships disappeared without a trace. Circe had been clear. If you sail too close to Charybdis, you will lose everyone. If you pass beneath Scylla, you may lose only a few. For perhaps the first time in his life, Odysseus faced a problem that intelligence could not solve. There was no clever trick. No hidden plan. Only a terrible choice. Sacrifice a few. Or lose them all. He never told his crew the truth. If they knew what awaited them, panic would destroy them before the monsters ever could. Instead, he quietly ordered every man to row harder. The cliffs grew closer. The sea became unnaturally still. Then, the whirlpool appeared. The water began to spin. Faster. And faster. The entire ocean seemed to collapse into a single dark mouth. The ship shook violently. Every sailor fought the current with all the strength left in his body. Their eyes were fixed on the water. No one looked up. That was exactly when Scylla attacked. Without warning, 6 enormous heads burst from the cliffs. Before anyone could react, 6 men were lifted screaming into the air. Odysseus reached for his sword. But he already knew. There was nothing he could do. The creature disappeared as quickly as it had come. The screams faded. Then, there was only silence. The ship escaped the whirlpool. It survived. But 6 seats would never be filled again. Odysseus stood at the stern. He didn't speak. He couldn't. For the first time. His men hadn't died because of a mistake. Or because they ignored his orders. They had died because he chose for them. And that burden would stay with him forever. Ahead, the sea looked calm once again. But the prophecy of Tiresias had not yet come true. One final warning remained. An island sacred to the sun god. A place where no man was ever meant to touch what grazed upon its fields. The sea finally grew quiet. For the first time in many days. There were no monsters waiting beyond the waves. No storms. No towering cliffs. Only a peaceful island resting beneath the sun. But Odysseus knew exactly where they were. He remembered every word Tiresias had spoken in the underworld. Then Circe had repeated the same warning. This island belongs to Helios. The cattle that graze here are sacred. No matter how desperate you become, do not harm them. Odysseus gathered his men before they went ashore. His voice was calm. But firm. Touch nothing. We will rest. We will repair the ship. And the moment the winds return, we leave. For a while, everything went according to plan. Then the weather changed. A violent storm trapped them on the island. One day passed. Then another. The winds refused to stop. Their food slowly disappeared. The men grew weaker. Hungrier. Every morning, the sacred cattle wandered peacefully across the fields. Healthy. Untouched. Always within sight. At first, the crew resisted the temptation. But hunger has a way of changing people. Days turned into weeks. Some could barely stand. Others whispered among themselves when Odysseus wasn't listening. One afternoon, exhausted from trying to find a way off the island, Odysseus finally fell asleep. It was the moment his men had been waiting for. Led by Eurylochus, they made their decision. If we're going to die, I'd rather face the anger of a god than starve on this island. One by one, they slaughtered the sacred cattle. They lit fires, cooked the meat, and convinced themselves that they would ask for forgiveness later. When Odysseus awoke, the smell reached him before the truth did. He ran toward the shore. Then he saw them. The empty fields. The burning fires. The remains of the sacred herd. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply closed his eyes. Because he already knew what would happen next. Far above them, Helios watched everything. Furious, he turned to Zeus himself. If this crime goes unpunished, the gods will no longer be feared. Zeus gave no reply. Not then. He simply waited. The storm eventually passed. The sea became calm. The survivors repaired their ship. And once again, they sailed toward home. Some believed they had escaped the consequences. They couldn't have been more wrong. Above them, dark clouds slowly gathered. And somewhere beyond those clouds, the king of the gods had already made his decision. The sea was calm, almost peaceful. For a brief moment, it felt as though the nightmare was finally over. The men laughed again. Some spoke of seeing their families. Others imagined the first meal they would eat back home. Even Odysseus allowed himself a moment of hope. Then, the sky split apart. Without warning, a bolt of lightning crashed into the ship. The blast shattered the mast. The deck exploded beneath their feet. Within seconds, the sea swallowed everything. Men screamed. Wood splintered. The waves tore the ship apart as if it had never existed. Odysseus reached for anyone he could save. There was no one. The storm showed no mercy. One by one, every survivor disappeared beneath the waves. Some were dragged under by the current. Others vanished into the darkness. Within moments, it was over. The prophecy had come true. Every man who had left Troy with Odysseus was gone. He alone remained, clinging to a broken piece of timber, drifting wherever the sea chose to carry him. For 9 endless days, the ocean became his entire world. No land, no fire, no food, only the endless rhythm of the waves, and silence. Then, the current carried him toward one final danger. Charybdis, the monstrous whirlpool he had escaped before. This time, there was no ship to steer, no crew to row, only a single man, at the mercy of the sea. The whirlpool pulled him closer, closer, until the sea itself seemed to disappear beneath him. At the very last moment, Odysseus seized the branch of a wild fig tree growing from the cliff above. He hung there, high above the raging water, waiting. Below him, the whirlpool swallowed what remained of the wreckage. Minutes felt like hours. His hands bled. Every muscle burned. But he refused to let go. Eventually, the sea released the broken timber once again. Odysseus dropped back into the water, climbed onto the floating wreckage, and let the current carry him away. Days later, a distant island appeared through the morning mist. Green, quiet, almost untouched by the world. Its name was Ogygia. Odysseus believed he had finally reached safety. He was only half right, because the island belonged to someone who would keep him there for 7 long years. The nymph, Calypso. When Odysseus opened his eyes, the storm was gone. The waves no longer roared. Soft sand lay beneath him. For the first time in years, he woke without the sound of war, without the fear of monsters, without the weight of command. He had reached the island of Ogygia, a place untouched by the chaos of the outside world. There, he met Calypso, a nymph of extraordinary beauty, immortal, timeless. She cared for his wounds, fed him, sheltered him. As the days passed, Odysseus regained his strength. But soon, he realized something strange. No ships ever arrived. No ships ever left. There was no way home. Days became months. Months became years. Calypso loved him. She begged him to stay. She promised him peace. She promised him happiness. She even offered him something no mortal had ever been given. Immortality. Stay with me, and you will never grow old. You will never suffer again. For many, the choice would have been easy. No more war. No more loss. No more pain. Only endless life. In a place where nothing ever changed. But every evening, Odysseus walked alone to the shore. He sat facing the sea, looking toward a home he could not see. He thought about Penelope. About Telemachus. About Ithaca. The years continued to pass. 7 of them. 7 long years. Calypso could give him eternal life. But she could never give him the one thing he truly wanted. Home. Far above the world of men. The gods watched. Athena had not forgotten her favorite hero. She stood before Zeus. Enough. He has suffered long enough. Zeus agreed. The time had finally come. Hermes was sent to Ogygia with a message no one could refuse. Calypso listened in silence. She knew what the gods demanded. At last, she turned toward Odysseus. Her voice was calm. You are free. For the first time in 7 years. The journey home could finally begin again. Calypso kept her promise. She helped Odysseus build a sturdy raft. She gathered food, fresh water, warm clothing. Then she watched in silence as he sailed away. For 17 days. The sea was kind. It almost felt as though the gods had finally shown mercy. Then Poseidon returned. The sea god saw the tiny raft crossing his waters. His anger had never faded. Dark clouds swallowed the sky. The wind howled. Towering waves crashed over the fragile vessel. The raft splintered apart. Once again, Odysseus found himself alone in the sea. But this time, the gods did not abandon him. The sea goddess Ino appeared beneath the waves. She offered him a magical veil. As long as you wear this, the sea will not claim your life. Trusting her words, Odysseus let the broken raft disappear beneath the waves. For 2 exhausting days, he battled the ocean with nothing but his own strength. Finally, land. Barely able to stand, he crawled onto the shore and collapsed. He had reached the kingdom of the Phaeacians, a people famous for their unmatched sailors. They welcomed the exhausted stranger without knowing his name. For the first time in many years, Odysseus simply listened while others spoke. He watched musicians perform. He shared meals with strangers. He almost looked like an ordinary traveler. Then, a bard began singing. Not about distant kings. Not about forgotten legends. He sang about the Trojan War. About Achilles. About the wooden horse. About the man whose clever plan had brought Troy to its knees. Odysseus lowered his head. Tears filled his eyes. He had heard the story many times before. But never from the voice of someone else. The king noticed. No ordinary man weeps like this. Tell us who you really are. For a long moment, Odysseus said nothing. Then he finally spoke. My name is Odysseus, king of Ithaca. The hall fell silent. Every person present knew the name. Not because he was the strongest warrior, but because legends had already begun to grow around him. The next morning, the Phaeacians prepared one final ship. No storms. No detours. No monsters. Only calm seas. As dawn broke, the ship quietly reached the shores of Ithaca. 20 years after leaving home, Odysseus stepped onto his own island once again. But home was no longer the place he remembered. And neither was the man who had finally returned. The shores of Ithaca were finally beneath his feet. 20 years. 20 years of war. Storms. Monsters. Loss. And sacrifice. Yet Odysseus couldn't walk through the gates of his own home. Not yet. Athena appeared before him. The palace is no longer yours. It has been taken. While Odysseus struggled to survive across the sea, more than 100 noblemen had occupied his halls. They feasted every day. drank his wine, slaughtered his livestock, and competed to marry his wife. Each believed the same thing. Odysseus was dead. Athena touched his face. In an instant, his appearance changed. His strong posture faded. His skin became weathered. His clothes turned to rags. The king of Ithaca had become an old beggar. No one would recognize him now. Not even those who had once fought beside him. Before entering the palace, Odysseus made one stop. His son, Telemachus, the child he had left behind, was now a grown man. At first, even Telemachus failed to recognize the stranger standing before him. Only when Athena lifted the disguise did the truth become clear. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. 20 years of silence could not be erased with words. Father and son embraced. The reunion lasted only a moment. There was no time for celebration. Odysseus needed to see what had become of his home. Disguised as a beggar, he walked into his own palace. The men inside barely looked at him. Some laughed. Others mocked him. A few threw scraps of food at his feet. None of them realized they were insulting the man whose house they had stolen. Across the room, Penelope sat alone. The years had changed her too. She had refused every proposal. Not because she believed Odysseus was alive, but because something inside her refused to let go. To delay the marriage. She had promised to choose a new husband only after finishing a burial shroud. Every day, she wove the cloth. Every night, she secretly unraveled it. For years, no one discovered her deception. Until one servant betrayed her secret. Now, she could delay no longer. The palace had become a prison. The kingdom stood on the edge of collapse. And the true king sat quietly among strangers, watching everything, waiting. Because Odysseus had learned something long ago. The perfect moment is always worth waiting for. Tomorrow, that moment would finally come. Night passed slowly. When morning came, the palace gathered for what everyone believed would be the final contest. Penelope stepped into the great hall carrying something no one had touched for 20 years. Odysseus' bow. It was unlike any ordinary weapon. Few men could even bend it. Fewer still could string it. Penelope looked at the crowd. My husband once said, "Whoever can string this bow and send an arrow through the 12 axe heads will become my new husband." One by one, the suitors stepped forward. The strongest among them tried first. They pulled. They strained. Some even rubbed the bow with oil to soften the wood. Nothing worked. The bow refused every hand. The hall slowly filled with frustration. Then, a quiet voice came from the corner. The old beggar spoke. "May I try?" Laughter erupted. Some mocked him. Others demanded he be thrown outside. What could a beggar do? That warriors cannot. But Penelope said nothing. She simply nodded. The bow was placed into the old man's hands. Odysseus held it for a moment. His fingers moved across the polished wood, as if greeting an old friend. Then, without effort, he bent the bow. The string slipped into place with a single smooth motion. The hall fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Odysseus lifted the bow. He drew the string. Released. The arrow flew like lightning. 1, 2, 3. It passed cleanly through all 12 axe heads. Exactly as it had 20 years before. The silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then, Odysseus stood to his full height. Athena lifted the disguise. The old beggar was gone. Before them stood the true king of Ithaca. For a moment, no one believed what they were seeing. Then panic spread through the hall. Some reached for their swords. Others searched desperately for the doors. It was too late. The doors had already been locked. Beside Odysseus stood Telemachus. Father and son. Together at last. The battle was short, but merciless. Every man who had stolen his home, who had threatened his family, who had believed the king would never return, fell where he stood. When the fighting was over, the palace was silent once again. Only one thing remained. Penelope. She had waited 20 years. She had heard countless lies, countless false stories. She refused to believe without proof. So she gave one final order. Move our marriage bed. The servants looked confused. Odysseus did not. For the first time, his voice broke. You cannot move it. No one can. I built that bed around the trunk of a living olive tree. The roots still stand beneath this palace. It has never moved. Penelope's eyes filled with tears. There was only one man in the world. Who could have known that? After 20 years. Without another word. She embraced him. The journey was finally over. Odysseus had defeated armies, outwitted monsters, survived storms, escaped the anger of gods. But in the end, his greatest victory was simply finding his way home. And perhaps that is why his story has survived for nearly 3,000 years. Because every generation understands the same truth. The hardest journeys are not always the ones that take us across the world. Sometimes, they are the ones that lead us back to the people we never stopped loving. More than 3,000 years have passed. Empires have risen. Empires have fallen. Entire civilizations have disappeared into history. Yet somehow, the story of Odysseus survived. Not because he was the strongest warrior. Achilles was stronger. Not because he conquered the greatest kingdoms. Many kings ruled larger empires. And not because the gods favored him. In many ways, they did the opposite. We remember Odysseus because he was human. He made mistakes. He let pride speak when silence would have saved him. He lost friends. He doubted himself. He suffered. And still, he refused to stop moving forward. Perhaps that is why the word Odyssey still exists today. It no longer describes the voyage of one Greek king. It describes every long journey, filled with hardship, sacrifice, and hope. Whether that journey is across an ocean, or simply through life itself. No one knows exactly how much of Homer's story is history, and how much is myth. But maybe that has never been the point. Because the greatest stories are not remembered for being true. They are remembered because they reveal something true about us. About courage. About love. About loss. And about the strange human desire to keep going, even when the road home seems impossible. After 20 years, Odysseus finally reached Ithaca. But perhaps the real destination was never an island. It was the man he became along the way. And maybe that is why, thousands of years later, we are still telling his story.